Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Faithless Forrest.
And I am Ben Snyder, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and people curious about living a life free of superstitious beliefs.
This is a call-in show, however, we have only one phone line. So if you can't get through, we invite you to email in questions to us live at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. And we're trying out our new Twitter feed as well, which is on the screen there in front of us. If you tweet that in, then our studio technician will forward the tweet on to us.
The monthly activities of the Rationalists of East Tennessee are on the first and third Sunday mornings of the month. They are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussion. The second Sunday is book club, and you do not have to have the book to join in. You don't even have to read it, just to come and enjoy the conversation about it. The fourth Sunday is the Reflections Gathering, a potluck afternoon gathering at a member's home.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun meetup at a bar or restaurant. Tonight's meetup at Barley's happy hour, right after the show, we'll have food, drink, and conversation. Also, on Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Gardens, and I think we may be moving to some place that's a little more air-conditioned soon. So join the meetup for exact time and location. Once you come, look for the silver covered copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table.
Today is July 3rd, and we'll be talking about general free thought topics. A lot of news stuff and maybe some stuff about, being the fourth.
All right, well, things in the news. Man, we got a lot of them there.
Yeah.
Shall I grab one here, or did you have one you wanted to start with?
Go for it.
Cringing in Kansas. The renewed complaints of a few members of the Kansas State Board of Education about evolution is making Kansians cringe. According to the editorial board of the Lawrence World Journal on June 15th, a NCSE, National
Center for Science
Education, previously reported when the board heard a presentation about the current status of the next generation science standards on June 12th, Ken Willard, a member of the board, distributed a letter arguing that the draft standard ignored evidence against evolution. And he also says, don't respect religious diversity, and I assume he means don't promote secular humanism. In its editorial, the World Journal replied, Kansans have heard this argument before and largely rejected it. The job of school science classes is to teach the best available scientific evidence, to teach about a variety of topics, including evolution. If matters of faith somehow conflict with scientific evidence, that is a topic for religious instruction, most appropriately conducted in private homes and churches. Kansans certainly respect a wide variety of religious beliefs in the state, but the argument over teaching evolution as a part of public school science classes has proved to be needlessly divisive and embarrassing.
I find it interesting that, so many people who are against evolution just, don't want people to know what it is.
There's a strong element of dishonesty that they often resort to misrepresenting it. They create a straw man argument.
Sure.
There's an interesting story about what was going on in Kansas. I wish I could remember his name, but there was, I think he teaches science at a university level, and to counter these activities when they were happening, I think in the late 90s, he created a group to teach that claiming that the teaching wasn't biblical enough, that they had to teach that the earth had four corners. And that leads to a lovely conversation of, well, does that mean the earth is shaped like this with four corners? Or is it a triangular-based pyramid?
Yeah.
Because that has four corners as well.
That's true.
And that gave him a lovely opportunity to talk about the alternate theories of four corners.
But it's interesting because I think if they had their way, they would have it to where you couldn't talk about it at all.
About evolution.
Right,
Yeah.
a lot of them really would. I mean, now there are those who are of the intelligent design persuasion who would, perhaps promote talking about it, but a lot of them would really prefer to not have it in education at all, which is, I think, silly. Even if you don't think something's true, it's good to know what it is.
In fact, when science is taught properly, one of the things that they do in teaching about the history of science is to talk about scientific theories that were in place and then how eventually they broke down.
Right.
And when we say in place, a classic example would be the Earth-centered model of the ancient Greeks that kind of culminated with Ptolemy.
Right.
And those models, explained the motion of the planets.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's an argument we should give the Greeks credit for, because they actually considered this. They said that, well, if the Earth wasn't stationary, if it was actually revolving around the sun, then we'd have every reason to believe that the sun was just a star like the others, and that the other stars are more distant worlds, and that they're not at the same distance, and that as the Earth moved around the sun, we should see some of those stars move relative to each other, just as the apparent background of this studio changes as I move relative to you.
Right.
And since they didn't observe that, they argued that the simplest explanation is that the Earth is at the center. They were actually using Occam's razor.
Occam's razor, yeah.
I don't do well translating from the written to the spoken.
It's okay.
You'll find me doing that more and more, or throughout the program. And so we have to say that their reasoning was actually correct given the evidence they had.
Right, given the data
at least with respect to no parallax of stars.
Right.
There's some other things that might have, you could argue that, well, they should have considered a little more, but that's a good thing. Did you have something you want to? We've talked about Kansas. Can you take us somewhere else?
Well, I can. I can take us to Louisiana.
What's happening in Louisiana?
Well, apparently there are some biology textbooks for Christian Academy which argue against evolution, and what they use against evolution is they claim that the Loch Ness Monster, aka Nessie, is real and is a living dinosaur, which proves that dinosaurs didn't die out and that evolution's wrong. But of course, in case some of our viewers aren't aware, Nessie does not exist, and there is no evidence that it does.
Well, I would say we have no evidence that Nessie really exists.
Right. None that we've got so far.
So this isn't a public school, though. This is a private school that is hurting their children's minds?
Let's see. It is... it's actually more than one school, apparently. Several private schools in Louisiana, and the textbooks were published by Accelerated Christian Education, ACE, and we're arguing that a dinosaur does exist alongside humankind.
Well, we know that dinosaurs do exist. They're called birds. And that doesn't mean that evolution isn't happening. It's an amazing thing. If we were to discover that Nessie was real and was I think the word is plesiosaur or something like that, it wouldn't disprove evolution in the least little bit. It would merely mean that our sampling of the extant species of the planet is incomplete.
Right.
We know it's
one
incomplete.
managed to make it this far and be able to survive in that condition.
Yeah.
And to have not undergone much change, perhaps.
All righty. Well, I pity the youngsters who are in that school and hope that that here in the 21st century they have access to the internet and some real science.
I have another school story I'd like to go into.
Another school story. Where does this school story take place?
This takes us just over to Georgia. Where was it? Georgia Public School, Beaver Ridge Elementary School in Norcross, Georgia. In there, I'm trying to figure out exactly which class. I think it's mathematics that they had these in. Examples that include slaves
Okay.
Right.
How are they including slaves?
Well, to quote the questions, one says, each tree had 56 oranges. If 8 slaves picked them equally, then how much would each slave pick?
Oh my goodness. Why in the world would someone inject slavery in such a sort of casual way into what should be, common word problems?
Well, it's interesting because it's like, why, like you say, why would they do this? And the reason why there are parents very upset, understandably so, or the reason is that it seems to make it feel like it's normal to children, because children are very young and they're not used to being able to pick out things that are odd
or immoral.
Right,
Yeah.
not as easily because they're still developing.
Yeah. I know I've said on the show in the past that a caller was calling in saying, where do you get your morals, as if to say, if not from the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I remember clearly my mother saying to me, when I was being a naughty little boy, as naughty little boys do, how would you feel if someone did that to you? Right. She was asking me to empathize, and I was at the point where I was then able to make that leap. Right. And I would say that a math problem like that is deliberately trying to perhaps prevent people from learning to empathize, or worse yet, is trying to habituate people into thinking that there are some people who are fit to be slaves and that it's not remarkable, it's not morally reprehensible.
Another example of this is another one which reads, if Frederick got 2 beatings per day, how many beatings did he get in 1 week?
Wow. When I hear that, I can't help but think, this is a joke, right? And I guess part of it is that I have read the autobiography of Frederick Douglass. And so, to the extent that an autobiography lets me experience the thoughts and life of another human being, an important human being that I know, that a little bit like meeting, is Frederick Douglass. And so when I hear that, I can't help but think that it's Frederick Douglass they're beating.
Right. It's interesting because district spokesperson Sloan Roach defended these questions by saying that the teachers were simply trying to incorporate social studies lessons in math problems for a cross-curricular activity.
Did they say then perhaps how many slave owners were killed during the Civil War? How many slave owners lost their possessions, and that, maybe that was a just outcome.
But the thing is that parents are upset. We have a quote here from one of them named Terrence Barnett. He says that something like this shouldn't be embedded into a kid of the 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. I suggest any grade. I don't know, once you're older, I think you can handle the subject matter, but I don't think it should be in math where it's handled. He goes on to say, I'm having to explain to my 8-year-old why slavery or slaves or beatings aren't a math problem. And when you have really small kids, I don't think they're able to really deal with that. They've got to worry about math, getting down basic, functionary things. They're not really at a point where they necessarily need to be struggling with these huge moral problems.
And it's a distraction to that as well. I know I learned about the history of slavery in the United States when I was in grade school. We were reading the biography of, I'm trying to remember. I don't think it was Sojourner Truth. But it spoke about how she had done something for which she feared punishment, and ran away and spent the night sleeping in a pigsty. And I don't know, I think after getting up in the morning decided to go back and face the punishment. And I'm sure this happened in mid-grade school, but it was the whole point of the reading. It wasn't something that was just thrown in peripherally as if it might be okay.
As a side.
When did you learn about human slavery in the United States?
I actually learned about it probably around that grade level, but it was within the context of actually studying about history. that was the point of the subject. It's what you're supposed to know about. And I think it was around like 4th, 5th grade or above, 6th and 7th especially. So.
All right. Well, viewers, today we're talking about items in the news. If you've got something you'd like to talk about, give us a call. The number here is on the screen, and you can tweet to our new tweet account there.
Please feel free to ask us questions, bring up any subject you find interesting. We're just opening our line for calls, and we'd love to talk with you.
All right. Well, I've got another one here.
Okay.
All right. Well, we have to apologize to the intelligent people of Texas who see through the Republican Party and their willful ignorance. But this is ridiculous.
Oh, no.
Dear Texas, this is why all the other states are laughing at you. The Texas GOP has released their 2012 party platform, and holy hell, it's a disaster. I'm used to them wanting to end Social Security and get rid of departments of health and education and going back to making sodomy a criminal offense. But now they're going after critical thinking itself. Who needs critical thinking skills when you've got Fox News, Glenn Beck, and Rush Limbaugh to tell you what to think? Just check this out from their party platform. Knowledge-based education. We oppose the teaching of higher order thinking skills, values clarification, critical thinking skills, and similar programs that are simply a relabeling of outcome-based education, or mastery learning, which focuses on behavior modification and have the purpose of challenging the students' fixed beliefs and undermining parental authority. Wow. Now, I'm no education expert, and so maybe I don't know what kind of Acorn-style horror show this program is, but the craziness doesn't stop there. The Republican Party of Texas supports corporal punishment in the schools, or as it is known in the 21st century, beating children. Critically thinking, is that a paddling offense? So amongst controversial theories, we support objective teaching and equal treatment of all sides of scientific theories. We believe theories such as life origins and environmental change should be taught as challengeable scientific theories subject to change as new data is produced. Teachers and students should be able to discuss the strengths and weaknesses of these theories openly without fear of retribution or discrimination of any kind. Well, on the surface, that sounds reasonable. They talk about we believe theories such as origin of life and environmental change should be taught as challengeable scientific theories, subject to change as new data is produced. And in fact, all scientific theories are like that. What they need to understand is that when you have produced a theory for which there is counter evidence, then that theory needs to be discarded and need not be considered again unless it is suitably modified to explain away, so to speak, the problem with new evidence. So thus, to go to the example I had before, if we thought the Earth is at the center of the universe and the sun goes around it, because that explains the motions of the planets, well, when you've got a new theory that shows, oh, well, if the Earth is going around the sun, that can explain it as well, plus it explains other phenomena that the Earth-centered model doesn't explain well. That means that we can't go back to the old Earth-centered theory unless we've got a really strong reason, a new theory that explains all the stuff that the sun-centered theory explains well, plus something that it didn't explain well. And, there is no evidence that the sun-centered theory of our solar system doesn't explain. On the other hand, the proponents of teaching alternate theories, they often relabel intelligent design, they came up, a book I read, Darwin's Black Box, they came up with several examples of things they claimed proved that evolution couldn't have made these structures because they couldn't be simplified. They recognized them as irreducibly complex, and every one of them can be found in simpler form if nature, and it didn't even take much effort to find them. And so at that point, there's a kind of important victory, and that is that whatever model they're using to identify things that are irreducibly complex, their model's broken. It's been demonstrated to be unreliable.
Right.
And at this point, if they were to walk up to me and say, well, here, I found a fourth thing, it's very, very worthwhile for us to say, well, wait a minute. Before you waste any more of my time, you have to explain to me how you've improved your test and why your test failed on these other things where we see evidence that it was wrong, and how you've improved it. Otherwise, you're wasting my time. And there are times when it's fun to have conversations, but if our lives are finite and we want to get to some truth, after a while it becomes time to discard useless ideas.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because it sounds like their paragraph with regard to challenging scientific theories stands in contrast with what they were saying with regard to challenging students' fixed beliefs. With regard to critical thinking, they say critical thinking is what they oppose, and yet they want to. And yet, critical thinking is what you would require in order to challenge any scientific or any theory on anything. So you have that opposition, that contradiction within their party platform, and it's interesting because they're being very devious in their wording, because you have them trying to couch this in terms of protecting their cherished beliefs from being challenged, such as immediately people think religious beliefs because that's what you always hear them complaining about being challenged. Also, they couch it in terms of protecting parental authority, suggesting that this is going to make your kids more obedient and thus make parents more likely to support them. And I find that very, very devious, because it's that's not good for your child. Your child should not always just submit to parental authority. I mean, especially if the parents are terrible authorities. And the thing is that a parent's education is not at all up to par with what your current children's education is. It's improved as time goes on, as we know more and as we learn more about educating. And so, to do that is very bad for children. To impair them in thinking critically, it makes them less able to compete in the global workforce, let alone national workforce, against people who do know how to critically think. And it leaves them much more perhaps gullible or easily manipulated with their fixed beliefs.
Yes, indeed. Well, in fact, you got to think about it. In terms of easily manipulated, what it means is that they'll grow up and tithe to a church. Isn't that maybe what it's all about?
Perhaps. I mean, it depends on who wrote it and what their motivations were, but it does sound a lot like they are trying to just dumb down their population, starting with the youth. Because one thing I remember Rick Santorum was running on, who was a very popular candidate until he quit, is that he said that colleges are dangerous for religious belief, and that that they need to essentially be thought they're liberal, propaganda machines that children go through. And it is true that when kids start reaching that age, they have been abandoning their religious faith, largely because they're out of the house and are free to do so, or they meet other people and all sorts of things.
And they engage their thinking skills and learn about alternatives. And as well, the human animal is a born learning being. As kids, we break stuff because we find out how it works. We see what's inside.
Yeah.
And, it's annoying to parents when kids break stuff, but that's how kids learn about their world. You taste things you shouldn't. You are careless with things because you don't understand the consequences, but it's curiosity.
Yeah, and in a related article about a week ago on CNN's website, they were talking about there was a study done that showed that analytic thinking, critical thinking, can decrease religious belief, and it's not intentional necessarily, but they pointed out that when you think analytically, your intuitive, in other words, your basic assumptions, the things you just take for granted, tend to be proven wrong, because when you think more critically about it, you realize, oh wait, that wasn't right in the first place. And religious beliefs are largely based on intuition, like, well, for example, cosmological argument, cause and effect.
There must be a first cause, for instance.
Right. That there must be a first.
When someone says it, at first point you think, well, maybe that's plausible.
Mm-hmm. But when you start looking at it more, it tends to break down. And just the basic assumptions, just assuming things without questioning them. And when you start analyzing and, asking questions, it starts to make it difficult to believe certain things. And it's not just religion. I mean, that's, all sorts of things, really.
Well, I think economics is a classic example.
Yeah.
When people make assertions, it amazes me that people will make assertions without bothering to say, well, here we look in the past and we see how a certain economic scenario played out. We don't need to theorize. There's lots of data about the past, and from which we can then constrain theories. People who operate on economic theories without bothering to cite instances of at least where there's correlation with their theories are wasting our time.
Right.
And the most honest people, they would go and look to see, all right, where in the past might there be things that don't correlate with this assertion, and that might give us ideas for where we need to improve it. We need to add other terms. So that's the kind of thing that critical thinking really gives you, is the question that should always come to mind is, well, what does the past tell us? What can the data show? Did you have more on that one?
No, just a few notes about it, just, about it being done.
Alrighty. Well, also in the news, it was announced on last week's host made mention of this. There was a Gallup poll, and I've got some of the numbers here. For the first time, a majority of Americans say they'd vote for an atheist for president. I must admit, when I heard that, I was just floored because, for a long time, it was a much smaller number. I'm thinking it was like over 70% said that they would not.
Right.
So this is real progress.
When you look at the numbers, it looks like, you go back to 1958, it was down to 18, and 1978 up to 40.
Yep. And so here in 2012, it finally goes over the halfway point, 54%.
Right.
And I guess this is Gallup doing the polling, and they must have been doing this over time since they've got it 37. Well, they didn't have the question in 1937.
Right. They weren't even asking about atheists at that point, I guess.
That's a great thing. I think it was a Minnesota poll where they had talked about atheists were the most distrusted minority.
Yes, at one point, yes.
And that poll is probably no more than 5 years old.
I'd say it's still fairly accurate, but I think becoming less so over time.
All righty. Are we nearing the mid-program part here?
Okay.
I guess if we can get our commercial run, we'd like to invite the viewers to watch this message from our show sponsors.
If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun.
All right, well, thank you. In case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Community Access Television. You can also see it streaming online outside the Knoxville area. Just go to ctvknox.org. And then you'll need to scroll down a little bit on the page and look for the window and push the play button.
You can send us feedback at the email address on your screen, freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. But don't wait, this is a call-in show, and we are live today, July 3rd, 2012. And you can call in now to the number on the screen. I should point this.
All right. The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets several times during the week. We even have meetups for fun, food, and drink. ASK's purpose is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee has Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussions of subjects topical and timeless. Once a month, the Rationalists get together for a book club. Future books include Muzzled, The Assault on Honest Debate, The Fair Society, and The Invisible Gorilla. You need not have read the book to attend, but of course it helps.
All right. Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where you will find that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
All righty. Drop my microphone.
Oh.
You're up.
Go fishing. So we are talking today about various new subjects, and we invite our audience to call in, ask us questions, talk with us, challenge us even. We would enjoy it and hope to benefit from it.
All right, what you got here? And did we get a call in with a question? Maybe we'll get past this.
They're discussing.
All right.
All right. We have a news story of the Freedom from Religion Foundation is urging the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta, to stand firm against criticism from 66 Republican members of Congress who allege that the U.S. Air Force is hostile toward religion. This is, apparently the complaint is that the Air Force requires the superior officers to remain neutral when discussing religion or when leading, that they're not supposed to advocate any religions.
I know there's been a real lot of complaints about what goes on at the Air Force Academy. In fact, I think it's somewhere within the last 2 years, the members of the Air Force Academy petitioned and got permission to put up some kind of a pagan shrine because there were, like, there's a, what do you call it? Not exactly a church, but a place where they hold Christian services there at the Academy.
Right.
And I know that after the pagan site was built, it got vandalized right away. And I know that there's a military freedom from religion organization that they've been complaining about coercive behavior at the Air Force Academy. It's kind of like this. They're cadets that, like, Sunday morning or maybe other times, they get to go off to church, but anyone who said, well, I don't really want to go to that church, they say, well, we'll let you peel potatoes, KP, or something like that.
Right.
In other words, they're given a duty that in normal situations would be considered a punishment.
The Republican representatives are upset because there was the removal of mandatory reading material that encouraged officers to attend chapel regularly, and there was also wording deleted that said if you're morally lax in your personal life and general moral indifference within the command can be expected, which is religious terminology, really, often spoken in church and so forth. Essentially, the FFRF argues that this is equating patriotism and church-going, saying that if you don't go to church, if you don't attend chapel, if you aren't reading your Bible, perhaps, then you are not going to be a very good soldier, you're not going to be good at anything you do, or at least not as good as you could be. And
that's creating those of us with non-belief or different beliefs a status of a second-class citizenship.
Right, or at least a lower class in terms of morals and so forth. They've also, let's see, I'm trying to think, where was it? The representatives were also upset that Bibles were removed from Air Force in checklists that they do not have those in, I guess, the rooms for people to read. Because FFRF pointed out that that's, since it's a government place, it is supporting one religion over another, providing that. I can understand if you want to
otherwise you would need to have every religious text,
or at least a fair representation.
I would say if there's at least one American, you better have their book. The Gospel of the Flying Spaghetti Monster had better be in there.
Well, I agree, but of course, not literally every religion on the planet, I would think, but still. And not just religious texts. Why not have economics, mathematics, engineering? A wider library that's not just one book that supports a particular religion.
All right. Well, viewers, this is a call-in program. We're live today. It's July 3rd. Yes,
it is
day before the holiday, the Independence Day. Were we going to remark anything about Independence Day?
We can. We only have about 20 minutes left in the show, and we still haven't had a call, or at least haven't had a caller come through.
A caller brave enough to speak to us on it.
We would like to encourage you to call in to talk or ask questions.
When I think of the 4th of July, as a youngster, I thought of it as, it was a good excuse for a picnic and watching fireworks. But as I got older and read the Declaration of Independence, it did take on a greater meaning. And I must say that I very much enjoy reading the Declaration of Independence on the 4th of July. And NPR often has a great segment in the morning where they'll have several persons each take a sentence or so of the Declaration and work their way through it. It's nice to hear one of our principal documents spoken with the great variety of voices that Americans now have.
Yes.
An interesting thing about the Declaration is the principal author was Thomas Jefferson, and his draft copy still exists. The Library of Congress has it, I believe, and in it you can see how it evolved. In particular, there's places where there are words crossed out, and then over in the margin there'll be a little explanation of why they're crossed out, and there's an interesting part. Within the Declaration it says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." And as originally written by Jefferson, he wrote, "We hold these truths to be sacred." And sacred was crossed out, and then self-evident was written in. And over in the margin, he wrote something to the effect, "At the suggestion of Benjamin Franklin." So Franklin was trying to scrub words that were related to religious dogma. And they groped for a phrase that was more secular.
Right.
In Jefferson's draft, he did talk about nature and nature's God, and he always writes God with a lowercase g.
Right.
Now, as it was finally published by Congress, I'm sure that it got an uppercase G because it was submitted to the whole body, and there was further editing. Not a lot, but there was further editing.
I also like that they made that change because sacred implies that it's something that is unchangeable. It is concrete. Whereas self-evident, we're back to intuition. It's self-evident to us, but later generations may find this not to be the case and can therefore
something else may
amend
become
it.
Self-evident,
Or become more evident as we analyze.
Yeah. So, encourage all viewers to tune into NPR in the morning and give a listen where I hope they once again read the Declaration of Independence. All right. Other things in the news. This has nothing to do with Freethought particularly, but wanted to mention, I heard of the passing of Andy Griffin.
Oh, yes.
And I must say that I spent many hours of my childhood in that man's television presence, and I'm a richer person for it.
Yes.
We're sad that he's no longer here to brighten our lives.
Yes.
Alrighty. You got more subjects here?
I can. There is a German court which ruled that circumcision is bodily harm, arguing that, especially with regard to a doctor who performed it on a 4-year-old, I think for religious reasons it caused complications, and he ruled this is detrimental to children, that you shouldn't, that no one should be able to do this to a child without the child's consent.
Is there an age of consent that a child can make for that?
I would think you'd have to be. Well, I think when I say child, I think more of parent to child, so 1 year of age to make decisions about your own health, probably. And until that point, unless it's a medical necessity, leave it alone.
Well, it is kind of amazing that religious factions, apparently the world over, there's just no other word for it. I mean, they're just obsessed with our reproductive lives and cutting things. It's just ghastly.
But there are two groups that have spoken out against the ruling. Bear in mind the ruling was only in a state court. It does not affect other courts in the country. But two groups that are opposing the ruling are the European Jewish Congress and Germany's Central Council of Jews, who argue this is a violation of their religious freedoms, which I find incorrect, because I would think that you have freedom to do things as long as it doesn't involve the harm or alteration of someone without their consent.
Well, within the Bible, in the Old Testament, the Jewish Bible, there's all this talk about how parents shall bring their unruly children to be stoned to death as well. Goodness, we don't do that anymore.
No.
And it's from the same book. How are you going to justify that one is somehow still essential to their religious freedom, and another is, our modern mores would call it, just unacceptable.
Right.
Alrighty. Well, here's another one. 150 Mormons officially leave the church. The 14.4 million member Mormon Church is less 150 Latter-day Saints after a mass resignation ceremony Saturday in Salt Lake City. Whether it was the church's anti-gay marriage stance, mandatory tithing, or the whole women can't hold office in the church thing, it probably varies from member to member. But the new ex-Mormons got pretty formal about exiting the church, meeting in a public park to sign a Declaration of Independence from Mormonism. The social structure of the church makes leaving as an individual daunting. So this final ritual gave the ex-congregants, who had gathered from areas as far away as Arizona and Idaho, a moment of solidarity before they continued their apostasies. Apostasies?
Before they continue as apostates.
As apostates on their own. All right. Well, leaving the Mormon Church is not an easy thing, because apostates can face repercussions and shunning from their family and the church. So making a public act of renunciation, as this group did, takes some real courage.
Yes.
There were a variety of reasons given for the defections, ranging from concerns about the church's history of polygamy and racism to its hateful attitudes towards the LGBTQ communities, to more esoteric doctrinal issues. Yeah, all right. Thank you there. There are reports that the Mormon Church is losing members in droves. Mormon elder Marlon Jensen, the church's official historian, would not provide any figures on the rate of defections, but he told Reuters that attrition has accelerated in the last 5 to 10 years, reflecting greater secularization of society. Many religions have been suffering similarly, he noted, arguing that Mormonism has never been more vibrant. He quoting him, "I think we are at a time of challenge, but this isn't apocalyptic," he said. The Latter-day Saints Church claims 14 million members worldwide, optimistically including nearly every every person baptized. But census data from some foreign countries targeted by the clean-cut young missionaries show that the retention rate for their converts is as low as 25%. In the U.S., only about half of Mormons are active members of the church. Sociologists estimate there are as few as 5 million active members worldwide. Why would that include the alleged 14 million?
I also wonder how many. I wonder if they count those they baptize who are dead, because they baptize those who are dead into it. Especially famous people, or if you have someone you personally want, they'll do it for you. Even if the person obviously was not, didn't even believe in God. Mitt Romney, in fact, had his father-in-law, who is a very devout atheist, if we can use the term devout, took it very seriously, had him baptized into Mormonism after he was dead, and which is an act I'm sure the father-in-law would not have approved of.
Well, you can go on YouTube and search for a marvelously funny video where Bill Maher addresses that issue, and I believe Bill has corrected this injustice by performing a debaptism. I don't remember the details of it.
It was very entertaining.
All right.
Very entertaining. But yeah, Mormons who do face some very difficult social problems, especially because in Utah, especially, there's so many of them, and you are shunned and looked down upon, given dirty looks, and just treated as second-class citizens if you leave the church. It is really sad. They actually have. I don't think this is quite the group I'm thinking of, but there are groups that they have where they go and meet as ex-Mormons just to have people to talk to.
Wow.
There, in his book, Losing My Religion While Reporting on Faith in America, I believe the author is William Lobdell, who was a journalist who went and met one of these groups, and it was very entertaining because one of the women he met there told him that her husband had not divorced her, but that it was really hard for a while because he would not stop wearing his Mormon underwear, because Mormons have to wear special underwear for religious reasons, to bed. And so she infuriated him a little bit by wearing a shirt that said, "Have you hugged an apostate today?" And so she agreed not to wear that shirt as long as he agreed not to wear that in bed, because Mormons have to wear the underwear all the time, apparently. So he agreed not to wear it in bed, so as long as she won't wear that shirt.
All right, wow. Well, while we're on the subject of Mormonism, I'd like to make mention of a Broadway show that, man, if I got to, I assume it's New York is where Broadway is kept, The Book of Mormon. I've heard some excerpts of that played as part of podcasts by the Freedom from Religion Foundation. If you go to ffrf.org and look up their podcasts, you can find one there, several, where they speak about this marvelously funny Broadway show. All right. Yeah, we should have a pilgrimage of freethinkers up to Broadway to go catch that show.
We have about 10 minutes left in the show. We would like to invite callers to call in and talk with us.
We're talking about items in the news, but if you've got something beyond the news, give us a call. We are members of the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. We'd like to hear from believers and non-believers. Call in and tell us if you're a non-believer, why, maybe your deconversion story. We always enjoy sharing those. And have we got more in the news?
I don't have this one written down, but there was an interesting news story about Bill Donahue, the president of, the Catholic League, I believe it is, had an exchange of rather anti-Semitic exchange with a rabbi who was arguing with him about Catholic hospitals and so forth not wanting to, have the insurance cover contraception for their employees, even though they will provide contraception and such to their customers, the people who go to the hospital. And in their discussion, he told the rabbi, "You should just keep your nose out of this." And after the rabbi rebutted him and said, "Oh no," he's like, "Should I keep my nose out of the raping of children by certain priests? Should I keep my nose out of other matters of the Catholic Church behaving immorally?" And Bill Donahue replied to that by saying, by warning him, almost threatening, that Jews should be very careful not to upset their Catholic friends, especially since they have so few of them.
So few friends?
So few Catholic friends. Saying you better not upset us.
Yeah.
I found that very interesting. That Mr. Donahue made what I would think to be a very serious public error of that sort. So
Well,
anti-Semitism is...
And it shows a kind of an arrogance that this person in a position of power feels, entitled to express. That's a terrible thing.
I mean, anti-Semitism isn't even, in terms of it being tied to the Catholic Church, isn't even 100 years dead yet. I mean, it was, I think, the last Catholic publication, official Catholic publication, that included that accused Jews of blood libel, which is kidnapping Christian children and sacrificing them ritually. That was in like the 1910s that it was published. Like I think it was either 1916 or 1919 was around the last time that was published. So we're almost there, but we're not even 100 years out from their last publication of that sort of thing. And so, and understandably, Jews have had a very difficult relationship with, especially the Catholic Church, because of the history of hatred that a lot of them have had historically against the Jews. And it's very, very disheartening, largely, to see Bill Donahue continuing in that vein of insulting them.
Yeah, well, goodness, it seems so preposterous that religious people can dismiss the evils that have been committed against other groups, and yet will so loudly claim that they're the victims of discrimination when they're not allowed to impose their beliefs on people of other persuasions. Largely,
it seems that's. I'm actually currently in a discussion debate with a guy who when I've told him about, me and another person have told him a lot about the different instances and all the different Christian figures, from even the first few centuries of Christianity, who have said very anti-Semitic things, trying to show him that essentially, it was born out of the early church, anti-Semitism, not by all Christians, but by a lot of them who believed that the Jews as a people had to denounce their God and rejected their God and tried to kill their God and tortured them and killed the Christ. And it's interesting because what you were just saying, the way he addresses that, he says, well, that person, the whole Catholic Church, they're not really Christians at this point. He said the Catholic Church after the Reformation, they're not the real church anymore, and then all the other ones we named, he just waved them off as not being really Christian because he says that real Christianity wouldn't teach hatred. And I think that's more of his ideal of what Christianity he would like to see it be.
So does that mean that Christianity, that God has changed when Christianity was created? As we were talking about before the show, the Bible tells us what is the source of evil. What is the source of evil? I think we get a chance to work that. Right here clearly in Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7, we have the following. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. Now, that's a King James translation. I have a Gideon here, and they substitute the word evil with calamity. But creating calamity is, that's not really very nice for the people who are experiencing that calamity now, is it?
The thing with King James is it's a highly untrustworthy translation, though.
It's a highly what?
Untrustworthy translation.
Okay,
Because
but
it's-
nevertheless, it's one that many people use.
It is widely used, but it's interesting. I just read Bart Ehrman's book, Misquoting Jesus, and he points out that it's actually it's based on one single text from the 12th century. That's currently one of the worst Greek manuscripts we have at our disposal.
All right.
So I'd be curious to see what the other various translations, especially more modern ones, based on wider range of texts.
Perhaps a caller in his last 4 minutes will tell us if they know that reliable translations exonerate Jehovah from being the deity who created evil.
I was worried that they have a lot to exonerate in front of, but I don't think they can do that in 4 minutes, but they're welcome to try. And less than 4 minutes, really.
Well, let's see. I found another item here. This is something that I've been hearing about for a long time. The Mount Soledad Cross. I think this is in something like San Diego. Yeah. Freethought Forum sends warm congratulations and thanks to Steve Trunk, whose legal challenge of a huge cross on public property masquerading as a war memorial was vindicated today by the U.S. Supreme Court. The court let stand Trunk's Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals victory, declaring unconstitutional the 43-foot Mount Soledad Easter Cross planted atop San Diego's Mount Soledad public property, public park. It has been a long wait for justice. Steve won his legal challenge before the appeals court in January 2011. The lawsuit actually began in 1989 when Philip Paulson, a Vietnam vet and atheist, first sued. Hey, we've got a caller. Jump on it.
Hello, caller.
Thank you for calling. Give us a name or a nickname, please.
What's that?
Hello, give us a name or a nickname. I'm Faithless Forrest.
I'm Ben.
This is Scott.
Hi, Scott.
Thanks for calling.
I would just like to know, I'm sitting at home listening, what is your mission here? Why did you create the Freethought Forum?
All right. We've only got a couple minutes. Let me be real brief. The most important reason is to not be invisible. We want people to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone.
That's the main reason. We also like to engage people in conversation. We like to let people know that we exist, not just the people who are like us, but the people who aren't, so that they can know there are people that they need to be aware of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you watched us previously?
What I find real disenchanting is that you're really going to turn people off with the arrogance and doing anything other than just trying to educate. You're not going to win people over by being arrogant and disrespectful. The only way you're going to lead people in is by educating them to the facts.
Sure, Scott. Within the non-belief community, we talk about and argue about just how aggressive to be. And I think many of us have to kind of come to the conclusion that those who can use honey and try and be sweet can do so. If all we can do is be aggressive, and if ridicule is the best weapon we've got, we need to use that too. The most important principle is not to be invisible.
But I would say that I do agree with you. It's important to be polite, and as far as I know, I don't think we've crossed necessarily any boundaries as best as we tried.
Well, it's a certain it's a certain arrogance that a lot of atheists carry, and they seem to try to make religious people seem as unintelligent when really they're just misguided, they're misinformed, and they are indoctrinated into the society, and they're taught these things from birth. It's not to mean that they can't be re-educated.
Right.
A lot of the most intelligent atheists were formerly religious.
Okay.
And so,
Scott, we need to thank you.
Personality first,
and
if you want them to listen to anything that you
So,
have.
Scott, we need to thank you and close up the show.
I'm
We're
sorry.
in our last 30 seconds.
You called late. I'm sorry, Scott.
Please, we'll be back next week. All right. So
We appreciate your call, though. Thank you.
This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. We want to thank Larry and Jonas for our technical support and the staff staff at CTV KNOX and our caller, and we
Thank
hope
you.
you'll be in next week.